Grand Rising, my loves. This is your girl, Empress Queen. I hope all is well with the family this morning. I hope your family's doing well. All your loved ones, your pets. I hope that you're feeling good, feeling great, smelling good, walking and talking with the Most High, keeping in touch with your ancestors and the angels, paying attention to all the signs that the universe is giving to you. I have no rights to this content. This is part two of the initiation of the flame by Manly P. Hall. So without further ado, let's get in there.
Before the Ark of the Covenant, and the Spirit over the mercy seat.
I'm gonna start this chapter
Forehead.
7. Start it over.
Chapter 4. The Egyptian Initiate. Many ages have elapsed since the Egyptian priest-king passed through the pillars of Thebes, ages before the sinking of Atlantis, thousands of years before the Christian era. Egypt was a land of great truths. The hand of the great white brotherhood was held out to the empire of the Nile, and the ancient pyramid passages resounded with the chants of the initiates. It was then that the pharaoh, now called half human, half divine, reigned in ancient Egypt. Pharaoh is the Egyptian word for king. Many of the later pharaohs were degenerate and of little account. It is only the early pharaohs we now list among the priest kings. The Masonic apron. In the triangle, we see spirit descending into the square of matter. Let us so purify matter that spirit may shine through it and make of us lights to guide the footsteps of humanity. Try to picture for a moment the Great Hall of Luxor, its inscriptive columns holding up domes of solid granite, each column carved with the histories of the gods. There, at the upper end of the chamber, sat the Pharaoh of the Nile in his robes of state. Around him his counselors, chief among them, the priest of the temple. An imposing spectacle it was, the gigantic frame of the later Atlantean, robed in gold and priceless jewels. On his head, the crown of the North and South, the double empire of the ancient. On his forehead, the coiled serpent of the initiate, the serpent which was raised in the wilderness that all who looked upon it might live. That sleeping serpent power in man, which coiled head downward around the tree of life, drove him from the garden of the Lord, but which raised upon the cross became the symbol of Christ. The Pharaoh was an initiate of Scorpio, and the serpent is the transmuted Scorpio energy, which working upward in the regenerated individual is called the Kundalini. This serpent was the sign of initiation. It meant that within him the serpent had been raised, for the true Pharaoh was a priest of God as well as a master of men. There he sat upon the cube altar throne, indicating his mastery over the four elements of his physical body, a judge of the living and of the dead, who in spite of all his power and glory, having about him the grandeur of the world's greatest empire, still bowed in humble supplication to the will of the gods. In his hands he carries the triple scepter of the Nile, the shepherd's crook, the Anubis-headed staff, and the flail, or whip. These were the symbols of his work. They represent the powers which he had mastered. With the whip, he had subjugated his physical body. With the shepherd's crook, he was the guardian and keeper of his emotional body. With the Anubis-headed staff, he was master of his mind and worthy to wield the powers of government over others, because first of all, he obeyed the laws himself. Scepters of Egypt These are the three bodies that are the tools with which we are to build our temple. When they are mastered, they are the living proof of our right to kingship. With all his robes of state, and with the scarab upon his breast, and with the all-seeing eye above his throne, there was still nothing as precious or as sacred to the ancient Egyptian priest-king as the triangular girdle or apron, which was the symbol of his initiation. The apron of the ancient Egyptian carried with it the same symbolism as the Masonic apron of today. It symbolized the purification of the bodies, when the seat of the lower emotions, Scorpio, was covered by the white sheepskin of purification. This symbol of his purification was the most precious belonging of the ancient pharaoh, and this plain insignia, worn by many others below him in rank and dignity, but equal to him in spiritual purification, was the most precious of all things to the priest king. There he sat, written upon him in the words of the initiate, the symbols of his purification and mastery, a wise king of a wise people. And it was through these priest kings that the divine worked, for they were of the order of Melchizedek. Through them was formed that doctrine which degeneracy has not been able to entirely obliterate, which we know as the divine right of kings. Divine, because through spirituality and growth, God was able to manifest through them. They were conscious instruments in the hands of a ready writer, willing and proud to do the work of those with whom, through knowledge and truth, they had attuned themselves. The sacred scarab. In this form, the ancient Egyptians worshipped Khepera, the rising sun, and the sacred scarab was buried with the dead as the symbol of resurrection. For as the sun rises from the darkness of night, so the divine spirit rises from the body that is no more. The life is eternal. But the time came, as in all nations, when selfishness and egotism entered the heart of king and people alike, and slowly the hand from the great white brotherhood that fed ancient Egypt was withdrawn, and the powers of darkness transformed the land of glory into one of ruins, and the names of mighty kings were buried beneath the oblivion of degeneracy. Mighty cataclysm shook the world, and out of the land of darkness, the great white brotherhood carried the chosen people into the promised land. Egypt, the land of glory, disintegrated into dust. The great temples of the pharaohs are ruins, and the temples of Isis are but broken heaps of sandstone. But what of the priest kings who labored there in the days of its glory? They are still with us. For those who were leaders before are leaders now, if they have continued to walk the path. Although his scepter is gone, and his priestly vestments have molded away, the priest king still walks the earth with the dignity and the power and the childish simplicity that before made him great. He no longer wears the robes of his order, although he bears no credentials. He is as much a priest king now as then, for he still bears the true insignia of his rank. The coiled serpent has given place to knowledge and love. The hand that bestowed the riches of the past does little acts of kindness now. Although he no longer carries the scepters of self-mastery, still he manifests that mastery in his daily life. Although the altar fires within the temple of Karnak have long been dead, the true fire within himself still burns. And before that, he still bows as he bowed in the days of Egypt's glory. Although the priest no longer is his counselor, and the wise ones of his country no longer aid him in governmental problems, still he is never alone. For the priests in white and the counselors in blue still march with him and whisper words of strength when he needs them? Have you seen people that somehow you liked regardless of appearances? Have you seen other charming people whom you hated in spite of their charms? Have you seen learned people who were fools or impressed you as such, or people who knew little and yet you felt were wise? Those are the insignia of rank which the loss of title or position cannot destroy. Kings with or without crowns they were, not puppets dressed in tawdry tinsel, and they still are kings, and will be to the end of time. And they still manifest their rank, not by their superiority and their high-headedness, but by the soul qualities which they radiate from themselves. The purity of their lives still radiates outward from those who wore the apron of the initiate. For while that triangular apron with its serpent drawn upon it has long since rotted away, still the spiritual counterpart of that symbol radiates in their daily lives, proving beyond all dispute that they were priest kings and are today. We find them in every walk of life, in high places and down in the mire of life. But wherever we find them, they are still the mouthpieces of the gods, and through them comes the promise to all who strive. They are kings, not of the earth, but of heaven. And in the life of our own master, we find one who joined himself to those who served, and was a true king even when his only crown was a wreath of thorns. Still, in the pyramid of Giza, the initiations continue. Still the initiate receives the insignia of his rank. Before that fire within himself he makes his vows, and upon the burning altar of his own higher being he lays his crown and his scepter, his robes and his diamonds, his hates and his fears, and sanctifies his life as a priest king, and swears to serve none but his own higher self, the God within. His robes are his soul body, and his crown is his life, and in the streets of life he is enthroned. The dusky towers and factory chimneys around him fade into the templed pillars of Luxor, and with a lunch pail on his arm, his face brown with honest dirt, he is as much a king as when the crown of the double Nile rested upon his brow, and the priest of the temple made him one with his God and his fellow man. The priest before the Ark of the Covenant, and the Spirit over the mercy seat. Chapter 5. The Ark of the Covenant. One of the most interesting symbols that has come down to us from the ancients is that of the ark, or the box that was said to contain the sacred relics. Many people believe that this belongs particularly to the Jewish nation, but this is a great mistake, because it has been the birthright of every country to have the ark. All have, like the Jewish people, lost much of their power and glory when they lost the sacred ark. In ancient Chaldea and Phoenicia, the ark was well known. India celebrates it as the lotus, and the ancient Egyptians tell how the moon god Osiris was imprisoned in an ark. In all the mystery religions of the world, individually and cosmically, the ark represents the fountainhead of wisdom. Over it, the Shekinah's glory hovers as a column of flames by night and a pillar of smoke by day. Every country has seen and felt its presence when the priests, kings, and initiates bring out of an old civilization, lost because of crystallization, the sacred ark, and surrounded by those faithful to the truth, carry it into other lands and among other peoples. In every creed and religion, we find crystallization. We find small groups of people separating themselves from their brother man. We find those who, clinging to the old, refuse to advance with the new. And whenever we find this crystallization, we find the spirit of truth, carried away to other people and embodied in other doctrines. The ancient ark of the Israelite never had removed from it the staves by which it was carried and moved, until finally it was placed in Solomon's temple. Neither does the spirit fire in man rest, until finally it is enthroned in the holy place of his solar temple. Ever towards the rising sun, its bearers carry the sacred truth. Nations are born of those who love the truth and are buried when they forget it. The time has come when its silent bearers have taken the sacred ark and the Shekinah's glory, and in solemn file have moved across the waters and brought it to the new world. The call has sounded through the universe, and those who are true to their own higher principles have surrounded the sacred chest. Those who have sworn alliance to their own higher being are following the priests and their sacred burden, and a beautiful mystery temple is being built in this beautiful land of ours, loved and guarded by those who are laboring for humanity. The staves are still in the ark, however, and only when real good can be done by it will it remain. The opportunity is now confronting the Western world. The knowledge of the ancients, the wisdom of the ages, is knocking at the door and seeking those who will follow it. The bearers of the ark have stopped and are gathering a nucleus of spiritual souls to carry on their work. And whether or not the word of the Lord will remain with a nation depends upon its own actions. And the actions of a nation are the collective actions of its individuals. If it finds nothing here attuned to itself, if it finds few that will answer to its call, the call of service and brotherhood, then will its priests lift again the staves, and the sacred work will go out into other lands. The life of a country thus gone, like the ancient city of the Golden Gate, it will be swallowed up in oblivion. The call is sounding, and those who love the truth and think and care for the light must join that band of servers who have for centuries dedicated themselves to the preservation of truth. Their lives they have given 1,000 times. Their happiness has been second to their duty. They are the keepers of the sacred word, and the law of attraction draws to them all who love and live the truth. A great influx of spiritual light comes to those who live the life and have learned the doctrine. And regardless of clan or country, they have joined the silent file of watchers and workers around the sacred Ark of the Covenant. Every individual, by his daily actions, is expressing more plainly than by words his ideals, his desires, and his attitude towards this great work. The composite attitude of a certain number of people either shuts out or lets in the light. Therefore, every individual has a great duty. A great work has to be done, and to that, the true student must dedicate his life. Then, wherever he may go, whatever he may do, he is being led, and the Shekinah's glory directs his footsteps. The rod that budded, the pot of manna, and the tablets of the law. In these three things contained within the ark, we see the threefold spirit contained within the ark of man's bodies. In the brain of man, between the wings of the kneeling cherubim, is the mercy seat, and there man speaks with his God, as the priest of the tabernacle spoke to the Spirit of the Lord hovering between the wings of the angels. Man is again the ark, and within him are the three principles: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The tablets of the law, the pot of manna, and the rod that budded. But as in the case of the ancient Israelites, when they became crystallized, the pot of manna and the rod that budded were removed from the ark, and all that was left were the tablets, or the letters of the law. When the individual crystallizes and excludes various sidelights from his mind, he excludes the life force which was flowing to him. He shuts out his own life, and all that he has left are the tablets of the law, the material reasons from which the spiritual life is gone. Solomon's temple, or the perfected temple of the human body, the perfected temple of the universe, and the perfected temple of the soul, finally forms the perfect shrine for the living ark. There, at the head of a great cross, it is placed, and there, in man, it becomes permanently fixed. The staves of polarity upon which it was carried are removed, and it becomes a living thing, a permanent place where man converses with his God. There, man, the purified priest, arrayed in the robes of his order, the garments of his soul, converses with the Spirit hovering over the mercy seat. This ark within is always present, but man can only reach it after he has passed through the outer court of the tabernacle, after he has passed through all the degrees of initiation, and after he has taken the third degree and becomes a grand master. Then, and then only, can he enter into the presence of his Lord. And there, in the darkened chamber, lighted by the jewels of his own breastplate, he converses with the Most High, the true spiritual essence within himself. We are working towards this, and the time will come when each person for himself will know the mystery of the ark, when the student through purification shall be led through the door of the Holy of Holies, and there be enveloped by the light of truth. This was his birthright which he sold for a mess of pottage. To this end came he into the world, that he might bear witness to this truth, that through this light all men might be saved. The ark, that great spiritual principle, surrounded by its loving workers, is calling all to follow it.
I hope y'all getting some understanding out of this now. All those people to be out there judging, the Masons and the societies that be on the outside looking in. Y'all go off what other people tell y'all. Y'all don't really have no facts on the situation. Y'all just be out here bashing people and judging people. So I hope y'all, those who have an ear, I hope y'all listening.
Through materiality and degeneracy, a great people are destroyed, or a continent sinks beneath the ocean. Then those that are true are called around the ark, and as its faithful servers are led out of the land of darkness into the new world and a promised paradise, all great teachings set forth the same thing. The student will find that it is true, and when he allies himself with the powers of light, when he becomes a channel for its expression, and when he radiates it from himself to all who need it, then indeed will the light protect him, and he shall become a son of God. The Holy Grail. See in this cup your own body, within which is the lifeblood of the Sun Spirit of the universe. Each day that we live, we perpetuate the Last Supper, and in all that we do, we drink again the blood of Christ, the life power of the cosmos. Chapter 6. Knights of the Holy Grail. Before starting to take up the study of the Grail legends, it will be well for all who are interested to read those tales that are now listed under the heading of children's fairy stories. For example, the story of good King Arthur and his Round Table is a cosmic myth, and while there is little doubt that he as a man also lived, the real mystery, as in the story of the Christ, is not the literal tale, but the
Also, Aesop's fables, they full of symbols and allegories, like Snow White and all of them, and Little Red Robin Hood. All those are allegories and symbolisms.
great mystic or occult truth that is concealed under allegory and parable. It is the same story. It is the same with the story of Parsifal, which can never be really understood and appreciated until the student sees in the knight and later king of the sacred cup his own spiritual development and the temptations he must also master if he would become a king of the Grail. The stone and the sword. Whoever can draw this sword from this stone is the master of this universe.
I hope you're enjoying this audiobook. I'm trying to educate our people, but some of them they don't want to listen. They want to listen to a bunch of foolishness.
Verse. In Lohengrin, also the same truth is shown to the world. It is the path of initiation along which each must pass on his road to self-mastery. To every nation and in every tongue, sacred legends have been given to teach man the path he must follow. The blind Homer of the Greeks, who told of the wanderings of Ulysses, gave the same great truths to the world. The skalds of ancient Norway and Sweden and the prophets of the Jews used the same means. And everywhere from the sacred books of the East to the legends of the American Indians, we find one great connected truth, told to many different people in ways that were best suited for their development. Such a truth is the legend of the Round Table, given to King Arthur as a wedding gift. All true students know what wedding that was. Not of earth, but the wedding of the spiritual and intellectual within the initiate himself. When the spirit and the body are united eternally, each swearing to honor and protect the other. Of such a marriage was the union of Arthur and Guinevere in the legend of the king. Let us, first of all, consider the coming of Arthur the king. We read in the legend of Arthur regarding Merlin the magician, the wise man who it is said had charge of the coming king during his youth. Merlin represents the hand of the elder brothers, who, realizing that a great ego had come into the world, had consecrated themselves to the work of preparing him for his mission. The Rosicrucian rose. In this flower, which was painted upon the center of King.
That's where the verse come in. It say many are called, but few are chosen.
Arthur's table, we see the soul of man, which through purification and service has blossomed out with all the grandeur of the initiate. It was under the direction of Merlin, the mastermind, that the anvil and stone with the sword thrust into it were raised in the square of the city when it became necessary for a new king to be selected. It was he also who called all of the brave knights of the country and told them that the one who could draw forth the sword would be king of all the land. And of all the knights in the land, Arthur, the half-grown boy, was the only one who could release the sword. There is a very wonderful mystery of the soul contained within that divine allegory. Let us read the letters that were engraved upon the sword. Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king born of England. The cube stone is the body. It has been so symbolized for centuries, and today among the Masons, The ashlar is the symbol of man. Experience is the anvil, and it is upon this anvil that the sword is tempered. The sword is spirit, and he who would be king in the true spiritual sense of the word must first show his divine power by freeing the sword of spirit from the casings of the lower man and the world. It is the same symbol as that later used by Sir Galahad, the guileless knight, the personification of the purified man, who comes without a sword, but who later arms himself with the sword of spirit that he draws from the cube block which was floating down the river of life past Camelot. Sir Galahad had the strength of 10 because his heart was pure, and the knight of today must follow in the same path. The sacred spear. This is the spear of passion that pierces the side of the Christ, the higher principle in man. But when in the hand of the pure of heart, this power can heal the very wound it caused. If you have read the story of King Arthur, you will remember how he was given Excalibur, the enchanted sword, how it came up out of the water, held by a hand draped in white. Excalibur represents light and truth, which is the weapon of the true initiate. In England, there still hangs on a courthouse wall the round table of King Arthur. In the very center of the table is a beautiful rose painted in natural colors. This symbol is that of the Rosicrucians, the ancient alchemists, and there is a direct connection between the legend of the British king and the ancient philosophers of fire. Now, let us turn our attention for a moment to the history of the Holy Grail, or the cup from which Christ drank at the Last Supper, and which was said to have caught his blood when he was dying upon the cross. Ancient legends tell us that this cup was made from a sacred stone which had been the crown jewel of Lucifer, the dynamic energy of the universe. It was said that the green stone had been struck from the crown of Lucifer by the archangel Michael during the famous battle in heaven. After the death of Christ, it is said that Joseph of Arimathea took the sacred cup and the spear of the Passion and carried them into a distant land. He wandered with his sacred relics through Europe and is said to have finally died. And those who came after him, after many centuries of tribulation, carried the sacred relics to Mount Salvert in northern Spain, where they remained until Parsifal finally took the Grail and spear back to the east, where it is to be now preserved. It is around this cup and spear that the legends of Parsifal and King Arthur have been written. And it is through study of this fact that we are able to better understand the mystery of the Great White Lodge, of which the Round Table of Arthur and the circular Temple of the Knights of the Grail is a symbol. Although we no longer have the cup as a physical symbol, it is not gone from among us. And as in the days of old, the brave knights of the Round Table went out to fight for right, so those knights of today who belong to the Great White Brotherhood go out into the world in the name of truth and labor with mankind and seek to right the wrongs of the world. It is said that the knights of Arthur's court always fought for virtue and purity, and so did those who rode out of Mount Salvert. The Grail Cup is the symbol of the creative force of nature. It is also the symbol of the human race, which is slowly learning the mysteries of creation. Within the cup is the blood of Christ, that force which is transmuting the body into soul, fast or slowly as we give it greater or lesser opportunity. In the sacred spear, we find symbolized again the creative force, which in the hands of Klingsor, the evil one, wounds and causes suffering, but which, when held by the pure Parsifal, heals the very wound that it caused. A great lesson is being taught to man through these allegories, but the average person is unwilling to stop and consider them. They do not realize that they themselves are the ones whom the elder brothers of humanity must use in the fight against the forces of evil. They do not realize that the dragons and ogres of the legends are their own lower natures which they must overcome. They do not see in the hand-to-hand combat of the knights of old for a lady's hand the higher and lower man fighting for the soul within. The knight of today does not realize that the white armor that he wears is his own purified body, which is proof against all the attacks of vice and passion. But nevertheless, this is the meaning of the legend. His shield is truth, which is a perfect protection to the inner man. His strong right arm is the knowledge and spiritual power he has developed within, and the sword that he uses is the spiritual light with which the pure flame of the spirit fire dispels the darkness of ignorance and the demons of lust. The sacred spear and the cup which he serves are the two poles of the creative life force within, the development of which he gains as he daily serves his fellow men. Far from the uninitiated, the 12 elder brothers of mankind, sitting around the circular table of the universe, watch the knights in their battle of life, and the time comes when the student, having finished his work here, is liberated at the foot of the Grail. There, the candidate stands robed from head to foot in the armor of spirit and in the pure white of a body that has been cleansed. Then the cloth is lifted from the sacred cup, and he is illuminated by the light with which would have killed him had he seen it without purification. He then takes his place among the knights of the Round Table and joins those who give up all and labor for humanity. When in sickness and in suffering, we beg of the great unknown that he send us help. Then indeed, our knight comes to us, as Lohengrin came to Elsa. When our loved ones pass into the great unknown, there stands the brother of the Grail, the invisible helper, who, through days of labor, has earned the right to become a member of that great band of servers who gather around the table of the king, and while their bodies are asleep, still labor in their great search for light and truth, and pray for the day when they shall also become kings of the Holy Grail. Chapter 7. The Mystery of the Pyramid. Comes a time in the development of the occult student when he understands one of the great secrets of the initiates, and that is that every sacred thing outside of himself stands for some organ or function within himself. This is, of course, true in the case of the Great Pyramid, except that this particular pile of stone, said by many to be the oldest building on the surface of the earth, is the great symbol of composite man. In other words, it stands for man as a unit. Let us first consider it simply from the exterior standpoint. When we first look at it in the distance, it seems to be one great stone. But as we come closer, we see that it is made of thousands of smaller stones, each one carefully fitted into place. Here we see the first likeness between the pyramid and man. We consider man to be a unit, but when we examine more closely, we find that he is a great number of small units, each working in harmony with the others. It is the same with everything. We take a successful life and we think of it as an entirety, but when we examine it, we find that it is a number of small achievements joined together. Cross-section of the Great Pyramid of Giza As thousands of workmen were used in the building of the pyramid, so there are unnumbered workmen at work in the building of our bodies, which are symbolically of the same building. There are many pyramids all over the world. We find them in South America and in Mexico. We find mounds which were made to represent them among the American Indians, and in Europe and Britain we find remnants of the same things. But there is only one real pyramid in all the world. Even the others in Egypt are but copies of the Great Pyramid, and were used as tombs for the pharaohs. But nobody was ever found in Cheops, nor were there ever any signs that it had been so used. Now, let us continue our analogy between the pyramid and man. If you will look at the accompanying illustration, you will see the pyramid laid flat, and you will notice it is made of 4 triangles, laid around the base square. The 4-sided base of the pyramid represents the 4 elements of which man's bodies are composed. These are hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon, or earth, water, fire, and air. These are called the base of all things, and upon this base, the 4 bodies of man are raised, each from its own element. Thus, the physical body is raised from the earth. The vital body is raised from the water, the emotional body from the fire, and the mental body from the air. The pyramid. Here we see the pyramid laid out so that the 4 triangles and the square are clearly seen. This represents man once again, and the ancient pyramid is man offering his higher being upon the altar of the great fire spirit. There are 12 lines used in the drawing of the 4 triangles, which stand for the 12-fold constitution of man when it is complete: the 3-fold body, the 3-fold mind, the 3-fold soul, and the 3-fold spirit. It also gives us the 12 signs of the zodiac, divided into their respective groups. Out on the desert stands the Sphinx, the guardian of the threshold, mentioned by Bulwer Lytton. It stands for the bodies of man, and is that strange being which must be passed before the student can go on in his development. The 4 fixed signs of which the Sphinx is a symbol are Taurus, the bull, Leo, the lion, Scorpio, the eagle, and Aquarius, the man, or the human head. The Sphinx. This is that mysterious being suspended betwixt heaven and earth, which has the head of a human being and the body of an animal. In other words, the Sphinx symbolizes man. I have already given you some work on the sacrum bone, and I told you that it was the gravedigger's spade. Here is a picture of the head of the Sphinx and the inverted sacrum bone when it has been turned upward. We see the Sphinx in the inverted sacrum, and also in it, the inverted Masonic keystone. All this is very interesting, but unless we realize the inner meaning of it, its true value is lost. But it is not chance that these things should be so. Most of you have heard of the dweller on the threshold, that creature built by our own actions and mistakes. Well, out on Egypt's desert, it stands and bars the way to the pyramid, the temple of the higher man. And the message that it gives to the world is, I am the bodies. If you would go on to the temple, you must master me, for I am within you. The Sphinx again symbolizes man, with the mind and spirit of the human rising out of the animal desires and emotions. It is the riddle of the ages, and man is once more the answer. It is said that in ancient times, the Sphinx was the gateway of the pyramid, and that there was an underground passage which led from the Sphinx to Cheops. This would make the symbolism even more perfect, for the gateway to the spirit is through the bodies, according to the ancients. Let us now enter the pyramid, and passing through the corridors, come to the king's chamber, as it is called. There are 3 great rooms in the pyramid, which are of great interest to the student. The highest is the king's chamber. Then below that is the queen's chamber. And down below the surface of the earth is the pit. Here we again find the great correlation between the pyramid and man. The 3 rooms are the 3 great divisions in man, which are the seats of the threefold spirit. The lower room is the generative system under the control of Jehovah. The center room, or queen's chamber, is the heart, under the control of the Christ. And the upper room, or the king's chamber, is the brain, which is under the control of the Father. In this upper room is the coffer made of stone, the meaning of which has never been explained, but which the student recognizes as the 3rd ventricle in the brain. It is quite certain also that this coffer was used as a tomb during initiation, when, as is the case in the Masonic initiations of today, which are the remnants of the ancient mysteries, the candidate was buried in the earth and resurrected, a symbol of the death of the lower man and the liberation of the higher. It is said that Moses was initiated in the Great Pyramid, and some also say that Jesus was instructed there also. Be that as it may, we know that for thousands of years, since the time it was built by the Atlanteans, it has been the greatest temple of initiation in the world. It seems also that its work is not yet done, for mutely it is teaching those who will see the mysteries of creation. It is said by many that it is the original Solomon's temple, but this we know is not true. For while it may be the first and original material temple, the true temple of Solomon is the universe, the solar man's temple, which is slowly being rebuilt in man as the temple of the soul of man. There is probably no point that is as important in connection with the pyramid as that of the cornerstone. On the very top of the Great Pyramid is a comparatively flat place about 30 feet square. In other words, the true stone, which is the head of all the corners, is missing. If we look at the reverse side of the United States seal, we find again the pyramid from which the top is separated. Omar Khayyam, the Persian poet, gives us the secret of the keystone when he says, "From my base metal shall be filed a key, which shall unlock the door he howls without." The value of the stone is better understood when you understand that it completes all of the triangles at once, and without it, none of them are complete. The key and the cross. Upon the cross of matter that forms our bodies hangs the key to all the mysteries of creation. It is our duty to take this key, and with it, unlock the door that conceals from us the unknown. This key is the spirit. Release it. This stone is the spirit in man, which fell from its high position and has been lost beneath the rubbish of the lower man. This is the true capstone that is now hidden in the pit of man's temple, in which he must exhume and place again as the true crown of his spiritual pyramid. He can only do this when he calls the thousands of workmen within himself together and binds them to the service of the higher man. There must be no traitors to murder the builder this time. And Lucifer, the one rejected by man as the devil, is the one who must, through the planet Mars, send man the dynamic energy which man himself must transmute from the fire of passion to the flame of spirit. He then must take the tools of the craft and cut and polish his own being into the capstone of the universal temple. It is interesting to note how the casing stones that once made the pyramids so beautiful and true were carried away to build the cities nearby. And in connection with that, it is interesting to note how the soul and body of man, the casing stones of his spiritual temple, have been sacrificed in order that he might have material things. As we look at pictures of the ancient pyramid and sphinx, which have stood on Egypt's sands for ages, let us see in them our own mystery temple, made without the sound of hammer or the voice of workmen. And as we sadly think of this mighty ruin, broken by ages of neglect, let us remember our temple, and that its cornerstone is missing also, and our walls are falling with neglect. Let us learn the lesson which it teaches. Hasten to perfect our pyramid, cap it with the stone of spirit. Offer upon its altars our sacrifice to the great sun spirit, and bury our lower nature in its ancient coffer. Then for us will its mysteries be revealed, and the sealed lips of the Sphinx give up their secret. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Choose now your path, the white grail, service, self-sacrifice, purification, love, study. Choose now your path, the black grail, prosperity at others' expense, selfishness, shortcuts, mastered by appetite, comfort. Finish.
All right, loves. I hope y'all enjoyed that. Now I'm finna get ready to start part 2 of my series on astrology. So y'all come right over as soon as I end this. I'm gonna start that. That's like a 4-hour book. So I did about 2 hours last. Did about 2 hours last night. I'm also gonna be doing a series on the houses in the chart and everything. But y'all to see what's going on. Go within, so you never go without, my loves.